Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and we are broadcasting from beautiful Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. Hey folks, we have a lot to cover on this Biden Thursday. Now everybody's getting all excited about Hunter Biden getting indicted. We'll get into that later in the show because we got a lot more important things to talk about. I know, everybody, Hunter, what's going on with Hunter? We'll get to it, but let me get into some other stuff I think is a lot more important. And let's talk about the president. You know, you have to ask yourself this question, because this stuff does not happen by accident, folks. Has the media and their Democratic allies finally convinced themselves that Joe, our president, is too old to run? That's right. You're starting not only from the esteemed columnist of the Washington Post, David Ignatius, who is a well-respected journalist, and we're not going to criticize him at all. He's quite good. But Ignatius has ties to the intelligence community. Every time there's an international incident, he's put on CNN, MSNBC, etc. And he's been a columnist at the Washington Post for a long time. He came out this week and flat out said Joe Biden is too old to run. And effectively at the same time stating the obvious that Kamala Harris is not ready to assume the job. So effectively what's happened is it has stirred the pot among the media elite. And it stirred the pot among much of Democrats who are, look, privately talking at the water cooler. This is the oldest, most widely held secret in Washington. Everybody knows he's too old to run, okay? He would be 86 at the end of his second term. He'd be 82 on Inauguration Day. Folks, come on. If that is the best the Democratic Party can put up, this country's in a lot of trouble. And I know they say the same thing about Trump, so we'll talk about him later. But when this came out in the open, I mean, you see it everywhere, whether you're flipping channels, watching the alien networks, as I call them, the MSNBC, the CNNs of the world, it's out there. So the question you have to ask yourself, why? Why is it all of a sudden coming to fruition that they're putting this stuff out there that everybody's known about? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. First and foremost is Democrats are nervous that Biden is going to lose to Donald Trump. You can see it everywhere. Polling data reflects it, but we're going to get into that a little bit later in the show also. The thing is this, why is it coming out now? Now, I'll give you a good example. Remember, for those able to go back in history, the term Malaise, well, that came about in the Carter administration. And it was really a contributing factor to how Ronald Reagan easily defeated him in 1980. But there was a malaise setting in the country. For those who have well-paying jobs, doing good, didn't affect them. But for a lot of Americans back then, in the latter years of the Carter presidency, and sort of now, there's some similarities. You're starting to see the word malaise pop up. Well, I associate that word, unfortunately, with former President Jimmy Carter. Now, Mr. Carter is ill right now, so we don't want to speak ill about him, but just associating that term, that came about because of the misery index in the country at the time. You're starting to see the malaise issue pop up again. Why? Because Joe Biden, 80-year-old Joe Biden, and let's face it, folks, when we get the right track, wrong track, it's not changing. So the perception out there that, hey, the country's going through some issues, the unemployment rate is likely to tick up, interest rates have been risen significantly, inflation's come down, but it's not down where the Federal Reserve needs it to be. Biden's dealing with a Republican Congress. His son was indicted today. Okay, there's things happening, and the Democratic Party, the question you ask yourself, are they running out of time? This is what Democrats are thinking among themselves. In other words, if they perceive that Joe Biden's going to lose, folks, they will get rid of him. Okay, that's just how the party operates. They're not like our side. Our side will go through, we'll nominate a guy if it's his turn, knowing he's going to lose. Okay, but that's not how the Democrats do it. If they have any sense that Biden will lose and or bad things are going to happen under him, then they'll get rid of him. But they're not going to, it's not going to happen publicly. In other words, you're not going to see an organized campaign to get rid of him. But with Ignatius starting the conversation, and oh, by the way, that carried through to legendary Democratic strategist James Carville. Carville was involved in Bill Clinton's campaign. Very, very smart political advisor, among the sharpest in my lifetime. Carville is also sounding the warning about this. Now, he's not as upfront right out there like Ignatius was, where Ignatius flat out said Joe Biden is too old to run. He should not run. Carville will carry the flag, but he has also alluded to the fact that, time is running out. And he's probably right about that. Now, the Democratic Party has token opposition right now in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but I'm talking about serious candidates like a Gavin Newsom. Well, now Harris obviously isn't going to run against Joe Biden, but a Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, the Democratic Party's got to make a decision. Are they going to plant the flag with old-aged Joe Biden? I mean, his press conferences, folks, you got to admit it, it's embarrassing to the country. I mean, when he's cut off by Karine Jean-Pierre over in Vietnam, and I mean, it's just astounding. They have to point him in the direction he's going. He talks about his back. I mean, it's really an embarrassment. The fact that this country has him as the CEO of the country, the President of the United States, I mean, it's an embarrassment. And the media, if you start seeing more stories about this through media outlets, through the traditional ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, then you'll know something's afoot. So, is this the last chance? Are Democrats panicking? I think you're starting to see the initial piece of it. We've talked about it on the show many times. Of course, we're not a left-wing show, all right? So that's not what we do here. But things are out there. Now, the impeachment inquiry, that's out there too. The House of Representatives has launched an impeachment inquiry. Now, that doesn't mean Joe Biden's going to be impeached, but it's out there. It's in the news. So think about this. You have Joe Biden, who is facing an impeachment inquiry. And of course, the White House is telling everybody in the media there's nothing to this. They're actually trying to get the media to rally behind them, to discredit the impeachment inquiry. Oh, I don't think that's going to work. But they're going to try. So think about this now. You've got an impeachment inquiry launched against the president, and you have the president's son that's been indicted on gun charges. The Democratic Party, Merrick Garland, they thought they were going to just, and Hunter Biden's lawyers, they thought they would slide this, make it go away. And without all the work that was done by the House committees, that might have worked. But a judge said, not so fast. And so now, what they thought was going to be an issue swept under the rug with Hunter is going to be out there. So let's sort of recap this. You've got the Hunter Biden, which I think is the least of the issues. But you've got all this money transfers, $20 million, that went from various bank accounts to the Biden family. Last I saw, Senator Biden, he didn't have a salary like that. Of course not. It's your classic definition of influence peddling. They haven't proven it yet that it ties into the president, but give it time and let it percolate a little bit. I'm going way, way back now, but when the Watergate hearings started, you didn't know where they were going to go. Well, they ultimately ended up with a president resigning. That's how we got Gerald Ford as president. So you never know where these things are going to go. And we're in an election cycle right now. So while traditional Washington, D.C. is going to circle the wagons around Joe, old Uncle Joe, the president, doesn't know where he is half the time, but they're going to circle the wagons. But maybe not. Maybe the cracks are starting to show. Now, why is his age becoming a liability? Crystal clear. If he had a competent vice president like he could have had, might not be as bad of an issue. Then he runs. Okay, if he's elected, maybe he serves a year and steps aside 2, or if he starts to really go senile, he would be forced to leave. And you have a competent vice president step in. Kamala Harris is not that competent vice president. I mean, let me relate this. Let's take a look at a couple examples. If something had happened to Donald Trump, would anybody believe Mike Pence was not qualified to be president? No. Unless you're a hyper-partisan leftist. No, Mike Pence was an institutionalist. He had served in the House of Representatives. He had been governor of Indiana. He was well qualified for the position. I'll go back further. George W. Bush. When George W. Bush was president, did anyone think Dick Cheney couldn't step in if need be? Of course not. A lot of people thought Cheney was running the government. Maybe he was. Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Say what you want. Al Gore was perfectly capable of being president of the United States. And, I could go on. Do any of you realistically believe Kamala Harris is capable of being president of the United States? Most people do not. Her favorability ratings are lower than Joe Biden's. She's not competent to be president. Heck, when she campaigned for the office, she got 0 electoral votes. She literally had to drop out before the Iowa caucuses. It was that bad. And we're not going to speculate who he could have picked, because he didn't. He ended up picking her because the Democratic Party told him, hey, black women are the base of our party. You better pick Kamala Harris. Or in her case, she's mixed. So again, the American public does not have confidence in her. That's why they're looking for a fresh face. Now, you can say what you want about Governor Whitmer, Governor Newsom. They're respected governors. They've run big states. They've dealt with issues. I'm not endorsing them. I'm just saying, from a governance point of view, they have some credentials to fill the office. I don't agree with virtually anything with them politically, but I'm not going to criticize them because they're a governor. Now, I believe his age, this liability has come up. And here's the key thing, folks. 77% of the American public, they think he's too old. 69% of Democrats think he's too old to run. So you throw in the age issue with potential uptick in the unemployment rate. I know it's been low. Super low interest rates will do that for you. But inflation is still hovering between 3 and 4%. So if inflation ticks up at all, and look, folks, it could happen. Oil prices are above $90 a barrel right now. If you see inflation tick up and the unemployment rate tick up, that's what's called the misery index. And the malaise will be talked about. Do the Democrats really want to run an 81-year-old man for president if the country's in that type of situation? Don't know, but that's the way people are looking at it right now. So you have influential people like Carville And Ignatius, particularly Ignatius, because he got out in front of it. I mean, he flat out did the unthinkable. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. As the government barrels towards an October 1st potential shutdown, and I would say the odds of that happening right now are pretty damn good. You have, outside of funding for military buildings and the VA, Veterans Assistance, there's no appropriations being passed by Congress. Now, what they're going to try to do, I guarantee you, McCarthy, Schumer, they'll try to do the traditional continuing resolution. I don't think it's going to fly this time. I think there is a likelihood that we will get to a partial government shutdown again on October 1st. I just see the differences are too far apart. And you've got conservatives in the House of Representatives, threatening to yank McCarthy out of the speakership. In the House, all it takes is one person to motion to vacate the chair, and they can have a vote to oust him. So he's not on what I would call rock solid political ground. Even though he might be right in what he's advocating, there's some firebrand conservatives in the House. They are planting the flag, and they are going to defend it, and they're not in a mode to compromise, I guess is what I'm saying. Led by Chip Roy out of Texas. Very principled conservative guy. So I think, all these spending bills, I think there's some risk in them. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, who gets blamed for this? Well, they always try to blame the Republicans. I don't think that game works anymore. People see the largeness of the federal government, the uncontrolled spending, the deficits. Hell, we've got a growing economy, and we're still running massive deficits. We're going to run a deficit $1.5 to $2 trillion this year with a growing economy, not even in recession. It's outrageous what the Democrats have done. And conservatives are going to dig in and fight these policies. You only have so many, cracks at it. And I think they're going to plant the flag here, and it's not going to surprise me if we do have government shutdown. It's not going to shock me if they try to do something with McCarthy if he tries to push through a continuing resolution. We'll see. But don't let that one hide, and the media won't let it. As we get closer and closer, you're going to see pressure applied. Oh, yeah. Blame Republicans. Blame those conservatives. Yeah, they're the ones doing it. No, that's not how it's going to be. Now, let's talk about this too. Mitt Romney yesterday actually, announced that he's not going to seek re-election. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, Romney, he claimed, hey, I'm 76, I'm getting up there in years. Look, Mitt Romney, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Mitt Romney's in great shape, good-looking guy. Yeah, he's 76, been around a while. But to think Mitt Romney couldn't continue to serve in the Senate? No way. Romney saw the handwriting on the wall. He basically has been in politics 20-plus years, maybe 25 years, really. He's been a governor. He's been a senator. Presidential candidate, should have won. Lost to Barack Obama. So Romney's well qualified. He just basically said, no, yeah, it's time for somebody else. Well, in the state of Utah, that's somebody else. There's no guarantee Romney would have won again. Utah's a fairly conservative state. Could he have been challenged from the right? Maybe. Likely. Now there won't be a challenge because Romney's going to retire. He's not going to run in 2024. That's a big deal, folks. I mean, Romney was, he voted for Trump's impeachment. He's been very critical of certain policies. He has been certainly one to work across the aisle. Romney's sort of like the old-style politician. He believes that you should be able to cooperate with Democrats, okay? And, at this point in the game, it's going to be, I think at the end of the day, Mitt Romney will be well remembered. Look, the guy's been a successful politician, okay? And he's worked his, he has worked across the aisle. But a lot of people, when Romney lost that election for president that he should have won, and the Republican Party shifted right, there's a schism there. So it didn't exactly play itself out. So, we wish Romney the best. And, he served our party, I think, well. I still have an old Romney for President shirt that I wore during that election. Listen, it'd be to beat the alternative. I tell you, he should have beat Barack Obama. He really should have, but he didn't, and that's history. Now, let me talk. I always like talking a little bit about polling and what's happening with the polls. I got to tell you, folks, nothing is happening. They're not they don't even move anymore. On the Republican side, yeah, Trump's up 30. Every poll comes out 30, 35. You'll see in individual states a little bit of movement in Iowa, a little bit of movement in New Hampshire. But aggregately, no, on the Republican side. Same on the Democratic side. Biden will slip a point or two here and there, but realistically, it doesn't even warrant airtime to discuss changes. It's so small. Right track, wrong track of the country. We're still sitting here. 25% of the country thinks we're on the right track. 64% says we're on the wrong track. I mean, that doesn't change. The number is tight. So, what's going to, are people just not paying attention? I don't think so. I think the sides are so locked in and the perceptions aren't changing. Now, again, I hate saying this, but we've talked about it over and over and over. The election's going to come down to 8 or 9 states. And it's going to be the independent voters in those 8 or 9 states that determine who the next president's going to be. That's just the way we work right now. There's 41, 42 states. I could put a blindfold on and tell you within probably a couple points of the margin of error who's going to win those states. That's how scientific the voting patterns have gotten. But on an aggregate basis, over 75% of the country says we do not want Biden and Trump in a rematch. Well, unless old Uncle Joe decides I'm too old to run, I don't see any change on the Democratic side unless it just gets so bad over the next couple months that a group of party elders, senators, donors fly into Washington in the middle of the night and say, Joe, the gig's up. I don't think that's going to happen. But you never know. And on our side of the fence, unless there's some consolidation around 1 or 2 candidates and certain people start to drop out of the race, it's not like Trump's leading by 10 or 12 and it could deteriorate. He's 30 to 35 points up. I'm not seeing, at this point, quote, a path to beat him. But, again, there's been no votes cast yet. So, at least on our side, there are people out there campaigning. You'll see DeSantis' numbers go up and down. Nikki Haley's numbers have bounced a little bit. But the country right now is continuing to stare at a Biden-Trump rematch, and a lot of Democrats are nervous that people that voted for Biden last time, if a tiny percentage of them move to Trump or stay at home and don't vote, Trump will win. And then the Democrats are asking themselves that question right now. Hey, if they perceive within the next 30 days that Biden will lose, they'll dump him. Or they will try to dump him. That's how ruthless the Democratic Party is. And give them credit for that. But right now, again, polling is between Biden and Trump plus or minus 2%, depending upon what poll you look at. And yet, over 75% of the American people do not want to see that rematch. All right. Now, let's get into this late-breaking news about Hunter Biden. Okay. They tried to sweep it under the rug. It didn't work. Thank goodness for the integrity of that judge. Because without the integrity of the judge, this thing would have been swept under the rug. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, who basically does the Democratic Party's bidding, justice is blind. No, not with Garland, it's not. They almost got away with it. They came that close, folks, to getting away with it on the Hunter thing. Now, again, an indictment's not a conviction. You know, Donald Trump's facing 4 indictments right now. But at the end of the day, this will be in the news. And it will be, you know, to the degree that the American public associate Hunter with Joe, that's bad for the Democratic Party. Because Hunter doesn't have a lot of redeeming qualities to him. You know, when you've seen those pictures of him snorting the cocaine, you know, with the guns and the influence peddling and $20 million going through a bank account and paying the big guy, he's got a lot of baggage. And that baggage, to the degree it ties in with President Joe Biden, that's a problem for the Democrats. So when you sort of tie all this stuff in together, you know, the Hunter issue, the fact he'd be 82 on Inauguration Day if he were to win, how he acts, particularly on these overseas trips, just the weirdness of it all. How the press secretary constantly has to lie to the press about him. You know, it's almost like they're taking a guy and, Joe, you got to go here, turn left, turn right. It's embarrassing. Our country can do better. Forget he's a Democrat. Heck, there's Democrats out there that wouldn't embarrass the country. And I'm not going to start naming names, but we've talked about them before. So, like I always ask, you know, our guests, okay, what are we going to look for next? Well, since this story is happening here on a Thursday, it's going to have some oxygen to it. The Hunter story will be on the news. It'll be all over cable. It'll be talked about. And we're going to continue to get updates on the economy. A lot of people on Wall Street are hopeful that the Fed can start cutting interest rates by the end of the year. No chance that's going to happen. You know, when you've got inflation still running 3 or 4%, and think about this, folks, oil's above $90 a barrel. Oil goes into everything. Do you think realistically you're going to see prices decline down to 2%? You know, Fed wants inflation rate at 2%. I never liked 2. I thought it was better between 0 and 1. But it's way too high still. Yeah, granted, it's come down from 9 down to like 3.5 to 4. But it's not ticking down. We actually had an uptick this month. So with oil high, look, we're paying $6 a gallon here in California. Standard unleaded, you can get around $5.50. But if you put any one of the premiums in, you're near $6. And what starts here normally heads back east. Now, I know some states don't have all the taxes and stuff we have out here. But if you think that prices are going to go down, you're kidding yourself. So I think there's going to be more pressure. This stuff on Biden's going to be talked about. And then keep an eye on the people that they're talking about. You know the names. Whitmer, Governor of Michigan, Gavin Newsom. They would be formidable challengers, I'm telling you. Either one or both. Don't kid yourself on that. And they'd be way, way more enthused by the Democratic base than Kamala Harris. So we'll keep an eye on it as it develops. But again, these are the things that are happening. And don't forget those poll numbers, folks. They are not moving. Right track, wrong track is not moving. The country seems locked in. And if it's locked in, and if it's Trump-Biden, Democrats are nervous. The basement strategy may not work this time. All right, listen, thanks for viewing. It's been great this week. I will be out. I'm traveling next week, so we're going to have a couple special guest hosts in. And I know you're going to really like them because they've been on the show before, and they're both very popular, very smart people. So thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening this week. I will see you in about 2 weeks. Talk to you soon. Bye.